Welcome to Better, the podcast about doing better, being better, and leaving the world a better place than we found it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Better. Do better, be better, make the world a better place. That is our motto. And a couple housekeeping items up from the top. First off, this is take two. First take I was trying to do with this guest. For some reason, the program just wanted to play a video instead of record one. But that's kind of the nature of being in a new space, a new studio. There's always some kind of technical hiccups. Today, all three of my HDMI extension cables decided to die, which I've never known to ever be a thing. But it is apparently. So always some kind of weird little technical challenge with doing a podcast. But the space itself, I think we can all agree after watching the first 20 episodes of this show, is a big improvement. I've got my happy place behind me, pictures I personally took in Las Vegas. And then, our do better. We have a be better sign over here. The phonetic alphabet, which I'm always trying to make sure I learn, because whenever I'm on a call with a customer service rep, they can never seem to understand what I'm trying to say. So I've got to spell it out as, Juliet, Kilo, Sierra, Tango, that sort of thing. And my sense of adventure sign too. So it feels like a great space to have amazing conversations about perseverance, doing better, being better, and making the world a better place. And today is no exception to that. I have a guest. His last name rhymes with pretzel. It's Jetsel. Kyle Jetsel, and I'm going to talk to him right now. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm doing real good. How are you today, Jay?
Not too bad. Take two. I am going to watch that recording sign and make sure it stays on the entire time we're talking. So I know you've done it already, but let's just jump into it. Cole's notes about your story that you're sharing.
So yeah, Jay, in October of 2021, the mother of my 6 kids and my wife of 30 years passed away suddenly. And so, in those moments after that happens very quickly, I realized pretty quickly we had built a pretty happy family, and I really didn't want that to be destroyed. We'd worked way too hard to develop that. And so, I realized pretty quickly that we weren't the only ones that this had happened to. I mean, other people had faced tragedy. And so I became, really, I called it a driven dad. And I was driven to really do everything I could to not only survive the situation myself, but thrive through the situation, because I knew that's what my wife would want. And also do everything in my power. I became driven, and it became my mission to help every single one of my 6 kids not just survive, but thrive through the situation. And so that became kind of my mission in life, is to see my kids continue to be a happy family, for us to continue the work that my wife and I had done, and moving forward, really help them achieve their full potential, whatever that was, and myself as well.
Okay. I definitely think so this would be 2-parter, like it is for everybody now. I definitely think in the second part, I really want to, the question I'm going to want to ask right off the bat. So I hope we'll both remember it is, was 6 kids a conscious decision? That's a lot of kids. I don't have any kids personally. My girlfriend has 2 boys, and what a handful. I can't imagine 6. That's already that's an impressive thing. Can I ask a quick question? How old are you?
I'm 58.
You're 58 years old?
Thank you. Well, I appreciate it. I can tell.
I really hope I have your genetics. I'm just saying right now. Those are 6 lucky kids if they've got your aging genes. Because when you said married for 30 years, and then as we were going through take 1, you were talking about something, and I was like, wait, the math does not work here. So with the look, so congrats on looking the way you do at 58. That's pretty awesome. So let's talk. Let's first in this first episode, this first part of the interview, let's talk about your wife. So kind of introduce the world to who your wife was.
So my wife's name was Shelly. We met when I was in my early 20s. And I knew when I was dating, I wasn't really dating to get married. I was just having fun. But I also knew that I had grown up in a tumultuous situation in inner city Dallas in an area called Oak Cliff. And so I had been surrounded by a lot of craziness, wackiness. And one of my goals was to marry somebody who was steady. I didn't really I needed a steadying hand in my life, number one. And number two, I really wanted somebody that I could partner with when I decided to have kids that would be a calming influence for my kids and really for me. You know, when you grow up in a violent and crazy situation, it you either become that or you want to kind of escape it. And that's
Right.
really
Yeah.
what happens. Yeah. And so when I met my wife was the prototypical Southern belle. Growing up in the Dallas area, she was feminine, she was kind, she was sweet. She had this drawl that was just engaging. And I remember we started dating and she was just she had a glow to her. And initially, you know, we became friends and we did a lot of things together and that really developed into love, really. And when we got married, I remember we and I'll jump the gun a little bit. It wasn't a conscious decision to have six, but we'll cover that in the next section, and we'll cover why we had six. Um, but you know, we really decided together that we wanted to create the kind of family we decided to create what we called the top 1% happy family and a top 1% happy marriage. And it wasn't always that way. There was, you know, obviously in relationships, there's ups and downs, and
Of
there's hard
course.
times and there's good times. And so, you know, we kind of went through the cycle of pretty much everything prior to, uh, you know, as we grew together in our relationship.
Okay. Wow. You know what's really funny about that is that the way you described it. So prior to meeting my now girlfriend, Shauna, and I know I talk about her in every episode, guys. I get it.
That's good. Good.
um, uh, I described my ideal woman as a Southern belle, the woman you would find in a Hallmark movie. And Shauna very much is a Southern belle, minus the drawl. She doesn't have the drawl, but she does have a very unique way of expressing herself. So I totally get the attraction to someone who's a Southern belle. That is what I've even before I knew that's what I wanted. That's what I always had in my head. There was a character named Lana Lang on Smallville, who was very much embodied that presence. And she was all, even when Lois Lane showed up on the scene, I was still a Lana Lang guy through and through. So I totally get that attraction. There's something about like I come from varying circumstances, we'll say, right? I've come from good and bad circumstance. It wasn't all bad all the way through, but there's something so comforting about meeting a woman who embodies those characteristics. It's almost like it redeems the world. Is that kind of how you felt about her?
Absolutely. You know, I've never thought of it like that, but she had a glow to her and a kindness
Yes.
that it was just, you know, no matter how crazy or wacky I became, she just had this kindness and a calming. I remember early on in our relationship, one time we were watching the news, and you know, a story came up about a character who had kidnapped a child and abused this child, right?
Okay.
And I became irate. You know, I was like, boy, don't you let me catch that sucker. I would, you know, and before I could even finish, and I was getting, and you probably know how this feels when the heat rises in your body and you're
Yes.
moving in that direction of like, oh man, justice will be mine, right? And I was
Mm-hmm.
feeling that. And before I could finish my sentence, she said to me, you know what, Kyle? She said, maybe you should consider uh, compassion for the family and the child. Instead of letting the anger overwhelm you, think about the child and the family and let that kindness and compassion and what you would give to them be your dominant thought. Right. And I remember, and you can tell by the way I tell the story, it hit me right then. Wow,
Yes.
this is a special lady, right? This is that's where she goes. And that's where I'd like to go. We always have the animal inside of us,
Yeah.
but it's really important for us to control that animal, right? For us to manage those things. And I knew when she said that, wow, she can teach me how to move in that direction, right? And we're not always going to get it perfect every time, but certainly I knew that that was her core, love and kindness, and that spirit was her core. And that was what really was. I'm like, yeah, this is what I need to bring me
Yes.
closer, right?
Life changing.
Life.
Absolutely. I have that moment with Shauna too. With Shauna, it was we were talking about something similar about, bad people doing bad things and all this, and she just has a core belief there are no bad people. There are simply people that were led down the wrong path, and the key to the world moving in a right direction is to help people move down the right path, and always leading from a position. I wish they could have met. They sound like they would have been great friends. But getting away from my relationship, the kind of you're married for 30 years, you said?
Yeah, I was.
So jumping to when if you don't mind, what did she pass from?
She
What
passed away
happened?
from COVID.
From COVID.
Mhm.
See, I didn't know that part of the story. Wow. Okay. So, and was she otherwise pretty healthy?
Yeah, she was. Yeah, she had. I mean, we all go through different spells, but yeah, she was otherwise pretty healthy. Yeah.
And passed away from COVID. I'm so very sorry to hear that. So okay, so she passes away from COVID. Those 30 years before that, I know this might be a hard question to answer. Might be a hard question to even answer in your own head, but the 30 years, were they, even though they're never going to be enough, like you wish you had 60, 90, 120, 500 years, right? Knowing what you know now, with 30, were the 30 years enough to make you the man you wanted to be when you met her and she inspired you?
That's a great question, and I appreciate that question. I find the beautiful thing about those 30 years is we went through very difficult moments and very difficult times where I considered leaving.
Oh,
And
okay.
we've never discussed this, but she knows that about me. She had never told me she considered leaving because we raised six very, I will call them strong-willed, spirited, challenging kids that will stress you the crap out, right? And so that they did that to us. And because of that, we had worked through those very difficult challenges together and had come out the other side. And I'll tell you a quick story. She and I don't know, after 25 years, we decided to change banks. It's not easy to change banks, right? All your
Yep.
finances moving from one place to another. So we had decided the time was right. We go to the bank. We're sitting in front of a banker, and we're taking care of all the stuff. And it's probably a 30-minute ordeal. And we're sitting there in front of this banker, and my wife and I are just chatting and doing what we do because we're just there, right? Signing things, talking. And we're done. About the time we're done, the girl the banker working across from us says, "Are you guys newlyweds?" Is what she says to us, right? And my wife started laughing. And she said, "No." She said, "We've been married for 25 years." And the girl on the
Wow.
other side of the table said, "I've never seen that." She said, I come across a lot of people who are newlyweds and maybe their second marriage, of your age, but I've never seen a couple that's been married for 25 years talk to each other and treat each other like you do." She said, "I can feel the love you guys have for each other."
Wow.
And as we drove away, my wife said to me, she said, "I think we may have just, reinvigorated somebody's belief in love." It made her so happy. But I think, to answer your question, we're never where we want to be, but we certainly, the idea is to be on the path, right? And
Right.
and
Yeah.
to have that goal and that mission, and then to make sure we're continually running towards that mission. And I think what I do now is, you know, you're right, 30 years wasn't enough. I wanted to grow old with her. She was my best friend. She was my confidant. She was my sweetheart. She's the mother of my kids. I had a friend one time tell me, he said, I like to walk in the mountains when I get overwhelmed. I like to go up in the mountains, just walk in the fresh air, and it rejuvenates me. And he said, what do you do, Kyle? And this was after my wife passed away. And I said, well, I struggle with that because I would go to my wife and she would calm me and help me feel rejuvenated. She was my mountain walk in the fresh air. And so, what I do now is I constantly, I battle that because I'm jealous when I see older couples in love, and I see them. I notice because I wanted that. But I also realize not many people get to have a 30-year marriage that results in a top 1% happy marriage and in a top 1% happy family. Not many people get that. And so my focus tends to be on the gratitude for that and to continue the mission that she and I started. So no, it's not enough time. It'll never be enough time, but it was also plenty of time for me to achieve, some of those parts of that mission that I hope for every person. I hope everybody finds that kind of love. And even if it's for 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 years, right? That is really why I'm driven now, is to spread that and let people know that's possible and help them achieve that. That's really, what a cool idea, right? To go home, to be happiest in your home with the person you love the most. So.
Yeah. It's, I find, in my journey, I found the only way to do that is to first really get a good understanding of yourself. And then once you have that, then you can, move in the direction of the person that will complement what you're looking for your future to be. And when you find that person, it's very interesting. We've been together 9 months, Sean and I, right? So it hasn't been 30 years, that's for sure. But I feel the seismic shift that happened as a result of meeting her and everything that we've now. I mean, we've been tested already. In January this year, I underwent a serious medical situation. She's a nurse. She stood by me. She, helped me through the situation when the medicine was like changing the way I acted. And she's just been that healing source for me since everything happened. And then obviously when you have kids, this better than anybody. There's challenges there, right? And I remember, I look back now and I think back to me as a kid, the way I acted around my mom and my dad, and I had a hard time quantifying what they were doing was actually for me, and I was a little shit. Just there's no other way to put it. And I've now since thanked my parents and especially my mom for the endless laundry bin that never seemed to be able to find the floor to it. It was always full. And the influence that they had, and then realizing the tension that my attitude must have put on their marriage. So I know in the next episode we're going to talk about your kids more, but maybe you're talking about the 1% happy marriage, right? How did you and your wife get to that point? Like, what were the golden rules, so to speak, of how you got to that point where you could define your marriage as being that 1% happy marriage?
A big part of it, and this is after we didn't do this initially, and I think that's why we struggled mightily. Once the kids came along and started, it's easy. It's a lot easier to have a relationship one-on-one when you start throwing different personalities, different challenges, different stressors, kids, money, all the different things that can come into your relationship. What we didn't do, and I'm so glad we figured this out, is I remember one night we were reading to my boys. My 2 oldest boys were little bitty at the time, and they were feral. They were out of freaking control, man. They were, and imagine her. She grows up in a calm, wonderful, sweet, environment, and then you bring in these 2 animals, right? Which is what they were. And There was no controlling. There was no, right. everything was a challenge, right? You know how it is. And I remember she and I really had to sit down and say, what is our mission together, right? I mean, well, first of all, we decided it's us against the world, right? My wife and I, we decided it's the two of us versus everybody. And that included our kids, right? And we said, you and I have to be united. Otherwise, we're going to be torn apart. And I remember one night we were reading to the kids and we were reading Alice in Wonderland. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Everybody usually is, but
Yep.
there's one point in the story where Alice comes to a crossroads and there's a Cheshire cat. And she asked the cat, which way should I go? And he says, well, he says, it depends on where you want to end up. And she says, well, I don't really care where I end up. And he says, well, it doesn't matter which way you go then. You just keep going and you'll end up somewhere. Right. And when I was reading this, my wife was reading it and I heard it and it struck me. And I thought, you know what? We're running super fast. We're fighting these battles with these kids and we're facing the world together. And we don't even really have a mission, a goal. Why we haven't sat down and wrote out what we want together, right? Not separately, but together. What do we want for our kids? What do we want for ourselves? What do we want with each other? And I remember it really changed the dynamics because it required us to collaborate on our mission. Not just, I had a mission, I think she had a mission, but we didn't have a mission together, right? And once we created that mission together, we both decided to be submissive to the mission, right? And what that meant was when we made decisions, when we talked about things, we knew the mission, and the mission had to be the thing that guided our decision making, not how I felt or how she felt or what I wanted or what she wanted or what we wanted out of the kids, but the mission became the guidepost. And then everything else was submissive to that. Our decisions, how we worked with each other, how we talked to each other, how we treated each other, how we treated those kids. Everything we did became submissive to that mission. And that really became the core to us being able to grow together and really create a world where our kids, when you have spirited kids, you don't want to break their spirit, right? You want to help them aim it in a way that lets them achieve whatever great and incredible, because they need that, right? They need that strong will. They need that spirit. You want them to challenge the world, right? But you just don't want to do it in your home. Right? But you really have to let them, if that's what you want to do long term, right? If your long term mission is for them to go out in the world and make a difference and be wonderful people and challenge the world, right? You have to teach them how to do that in your own home. And so, sitting down and saying, hey, let's write out a mission statement, not just a mission statement, but let's talk about, spirituality. Let's talk about physicality. Let's talk about emotional health. Just make a list of whatever it is you want together and make that document, write it out. And by the way, it's going to change. It's going to change a lot, but
living document for sure. Absolutely.
It gives you something that you can both be submissive to, right? You can take your ego out of stuff. She can take her ego out. You're not hurt when she makes decisions that aren't nice for you short term, but they're submissive to the mission. You understand, and she can do the same. And it's a really powerful thing to be able to do together.
It's interesting. It's almost like building a business plan for a marriage.
What? Here's what happens. You know this, Jay, all too often we make decisions in the heat of the moment when our emotions are at their peak. And it's absolutely 99.9% of the time, it's the worst time to make a decision, especially together, because your emotions don't match her emotions, right? There's conflict. Let's not make decisions in those moments. Let's find a moment where we can sit down together and put ourselves in a spirit of love towards each other and say, what do we want together long term? What do we want for ourselves and our worlds and our, every aspect of it? And it might be a volume, right? It might not be one page, but a volume is great, right? Then you start to understand who you are, who she is, and you can work together to accomplish those goals. So,
wow, that's a big answer. It's a good answer. I I hear that and I think to myself, the famous expression, the best laid plans of mice and men, right? And you talk about it, the plan evolving and all that over time. Um, I would think that did you still, was there still room for spontaneity, even though you had this plan?
Absolutely. I'm sure you're familiar with Tony Robbins, right?
Yes.
Six basic human needs, right? Certainty, variety. I can't name them all right now,
Fair enough.
but all those have to be part of your plan, right? And again, it's not a here's what we're going to do today, here's what we're going to do tomorrow. It's a goal that you both are wanting to achieve together. Your days, listen, the world's never going to be boring. It's never going to allow it to be boring, right? So to imagine, and I understand how some people I'm a planner. My wife wasn't. She lived life through spontaneity, and so that became part of our long-term goal, right? Is to make sure that we encompass both of those things. So if we're worried that we'll get too rigid in our approach, the world isn't designed like that. You're going to get stuff hit you from all different angles. I
That's
mean,
true.
good luck planning your life in a way that's not going to create challenges. You will face challenges. You will face trials. You're going to get the crap beat out of you, right? Like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan till they get smacked in the face, right? That's going to happen. But your mission should be bigger than those moments, right? It should be, and it's also going to tell you if this is the person you want to spend your life with too, right? I mean, you may sit down with someone and they may say, "Yeah, that's not my mission," and it never will be. And there's negotiation there. There's a possibility for all kinds of stuff, right? But
Mhm.
you might also find out that the idea of sitting down and doing that is so foreign to somebody they are not going to do it. And maybe that's something you have to consider as well. There's a lot of things that go into it for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of one common thread I've noticed talking about relationships and everything on this podcast and in general in life. The one thing I'm starting to learn is, and the one thing I've definitely learned with Shauna is that dropping the pretense and the show and the honeymoon and all that sort of stuff in the beginning and just being honest from day one about the past, the present, and the future can get you where you want to go a lot faster than putting on that show that a lot of people put on when they're dating. That I did. I'm sure you did at some point when you were just, dating for fun and everything. Yeah, we're talking more about your kids in the second part of this, but I thought maybe a good way to end this off is to immortalize something, a moment with your wife that, that you can tell us about that was just a shining moment in your marriage. And then we can take a little break and then go to part two.
Well, I've told you about, one of the proudest moments of my life where in the bank where the lady asked if we were newlyweds. There's nothing that will make you feel like you got some things that you're doing right than that, right?
Right.
But I'll share another moment with you, and this will lead into my kids on the other side. And it wasn't a great moment. It was one of the hardest moments of our life. One morning at, I don't know, 6:30 in the morning, one of my sons woke up, and it was my more severe. I have a son who's more severe on the autism spectrum. And so he can't be reasoned with. He doesn't really understand reason. So it's difficult, right? And he's unafraid to cross any line. Most kids have a line they won't cross. They won't come at you with a knife, right? At 5 years old. They won't throw a brick at your head at 5 years old. I'm sharing some insight here to let you know who this little boy was, right?
Right.
So at 6:30 in the morning, we're awakened by a blood-curdling scream. He wakes the whole house up. We don't know what's going on. And usually, we call it an autistic meltdown because it could be anything overstimulation. Sometimes it's bad behavior, sometimes it's not. It's hard to tell. But usually they would last from 15 minutes to maybe an hour at the most. But because of the stress, it could ruin your entire day, right? Well, this meltdown was the meltdown of all meltdowns, and it lasted 4 hours. And every time we thought we would get him calmed back down, he would ramp back up. He ended up throwing a brick through a glass window, smashed his head against the wall, and he had a big gash. I had to, tape up with butterfly bandages. And by the time this was all over, it was like a hurricane had hit our house at the same time as a tidal wave, with a tornado going on, right? I mean, it was the worst thing ever. And at the end of this, I'll never forget, it created an argument between my wife and I, and we started just hurtling insults back and forth. And she's like, if you would just treat him with kindness and love, he would have calmed down quicker. And I'm like, if you could create discipline in his life, and I think what happens is when things go horribly wrong, you look for somebody to blame.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's the person that you love that's right there next to you. Right. And that's what we were doing. And I'll never forget, my wife was very passive and loving and kind, but on this morning, gone. She was ready to fight, and it was bad. And I remember after arguing for a while, I realized it wasn't calming down, and I was getting more and more escalated. And I thought it's time for me to step away. And so I remember walking out on the front porch, and I had my keys in my pocket. And I thought to myself, I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back. That's it. This is not the life I signed up for. And in that moment, I had a memory cross my mind of my father. When I was about 11 or 12 years old, I was playing in a baseball game, and we needed one out, and the game is over. I'm on defense, and the kid hits the ball to me, and I make an error. And then we end up losing. They win. It's all my fault, right? My fault. So I go over to my dad, and I was 11 or 12, and that's your world at 11 or 12, right? And I was distraught.
Sure.
And my dad got down, and I said, Dad, you know what? I wish they hadn't hit the ball to me, because then we could have won. And my dad, I remember, got down on my level, and he said, you know what, son? That's not the way we do things in this life. You don't ever want to leave your success or failure in anybody else's hands. Don't you ever go down without the biggest fight. You work and train and practice, and then you want every ball, every game hit to you. You want to take every last shot. You be the reason. And he says, you're going to fail a lot in this, but you're going to have those moments where you succeed, but don't you ever pass the buck. And that memory hit me right in that moment. And I thought, you know what? My family matters. I'm not leaving, and I'm going to fix this crap. I'm going to figure this out, or I'm going to die trying. And so I spun around and walked inside to my wife, and I think she was still mad, because I told her, you know what? I'm not leaving, and I'm going to fix this. And she said to me, good luck. And she was so angry. And that memory is drilled into my brain, because I realized in that moment she had lost faith in me as a husband and as a father. And it was my job in that moment to say, I'm going to be driven to restore her faith, become the husband she needs, and the father my kids need. And that is going to drive me. If I die trying and I never succeed, I don't care. That is what I will become. And I'm going to run that path as hard as I possibly can. So that's a moment that's etched in my memory forever, that will lead us into our next section, I think, pretty good.
Well, that's a better moment if I've ever heard one. That's great. Okay. Well, that's going to wrap up part one with Trevor Jetsel. And we're going to come back with part two. We're going to talk more about his 6 kids. Crazy. And I hope you guys can follow along with part one and part two. And as always, if you love this interview, please go and subscribe, like, follow, share, and rate the show. And yes, we'll be back with part two. And I can't wait to hear how it is that this man right here can handle 6 children on his own. That's wild. All right. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for checking out Better. If you got to the end, it must mean you liked the episode, right? So how about 5 stars, maybe a sub, maybe a share, great universal comment points, and good luck on your better journey.